morning, everyone, or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to GW Institute for Korean Studies, or GWIX. I'm Yeonho Kim, Associate Director of GWIX. Thank you for joining today's North Korea Economic Forum annual panel discussion, co-hosted with the Institute for Peace and Unification Studies, or IPUS, at Seoul National University. We're providing simultaneous interpretation, so please click the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select either Korean or English. Now, let me turn it over to Celeste Arrington, Director of GWIX, and Bum-Soo Kim, Director of IPUS, for their welcome remarks. Celeste?
Thank you, Yono. Good morning and good evening, everyone. As Yono mentioned, I'm the director of GWIX, and I'm also a professor in political science and international affairs here at the George Washington University. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to our fifth annual spring webinar for the North Korea Economic Forum. This is a very unusual forum which focuses on North Korea's economy in particular, trying to bring more of the economic analysis into the discussions inside the Beltway here in Washington, D.C. This forum would not be possible without the thought and hard work of Dr. Yeonho Kim, our Associate Director, as well as the North Korea Economic Forum Steering Committee, which is chaired currently by Rachel and Troy, and includes also Bill Brown and Bill Newcomb. It would also not be possible without the generous support over the years from the Korea Development Institute School of Public Policy and Management. For this particular webinar, we are very pleased over the past few years to have cooperated with Seoul National University's Institute for Peace and Unification Studies. I think this partnership has really allowed us to reach a broader audience and to bring in a more diverse array of speakers to this annual webinar. So it's been a great pleasure working with you. And before I turn it over to my colleague, Professor Kim Bum-Soo, I would also like to thank our GWIX staff, Program Manager Ravina Ugale and Program Coordinator Habin Peck, who are doing a lot of the work behind the scenes. I look forward to the interesting remarks of our honored speakers today, and I will now turn it over to Bum-Soo Kim from Seoul National University's Institute for Peace and Unification Studies. So welcome to everyone. Thank you.
Good morning for American participants and good evening for Korean participants. First of all, on behalf of the Institute for Peace and Unification Studies, I would like to welcome all of you to join today's webinar, Assessing North Korea's 20 by 10 Regional Development Policy. As all of you already know, about 2 months ago, the Ninth Congress of Workers' Labour Party was held in Pyongyang, and at the time, Chairman Jong Un emphasized the regional development 20 by 10 policy as the strategic achievement of the party. He highly evaluated the miraculous result of the past 2 years of policy, framing them as a product of public support. Furthermore, as you know, he declared a qualitative expansion of the policy, and he said that the policy would expand to encompassing science, healthcare, and cultural infrastructure across all provinces. So today, our distinguished speakers will examine this policy, focusing on political recalibration and economic feasibility. I think personally it is very timely and relevant to examine these issues, and hope all of you enjoy today's webinar. Finally, I would express my sincere thanks to Director Addington and Associate Director Yeonho Kim and staff members of the GW Institute for Korean Studies for coordinating and preparing all the arrangements. And great thanks to our distinguished speakers for their insightful and informative presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bum-Soo. Now, let me begin the first session of today's panel discussion on political logic and governance reconfiguration. We're joined by Ken Goss, analyst and senior advisor of the North Korea program at the Institute of Defense Analysis. And Dr. Ho-jae Kang, a Lehrkraft für besondere Aufgaben with the Institute of Korean Studies at Free University in Berlin. Hopefully my German pronunciation was good enough. In the interest of time, I would encourage the audience to refer to the event announcement for each speaker's full bio. Now, let me start with you, Ken. As we think about the political logic behind the 20 by 10 regional development policy, what do you see as the key governing strategy emerging from the recent Party Congress? How should we understand the relationship between political restructuring and this new economic initiative?
Thank you, and thank you for this very informative meeting, very topical meeting. We'll be discussing the 20 by 10 policy today. What I'd like to do a little bit is kind of put it into the political context coming out of the 9th Party Congress and the Supreme People's Assembly meeting in March, and kind of give you some of the kind of larger kind of political construct in which economic policy is evolving toward. I will touch a bit on the economy itself, but I'm not an economist myself, so I know the other people, other speakers will be going much more in depth than that. But if we look at the 9th Party Congress, which happened in February, it served, I think, as a critical platform for Kim Jong Un to codify a new era of sustainable institutionalization and generational leadership. It also finalized the transition toward a system of endurance focused on stabilization, consolidation, and qualitative development of the economy through 2030. And central to this vision was the 2010 policy, which mandates building modern industrial factories in 20 cities and counties every year over a decade to bridge the gap between Pyongyang and the provinces. At least that's how they describe it. In my speech today, I'll touch on a bit on the Congress and leadership politics. I'll make it very brief because I know I only have a few minutes, and then transition into talking about the 2010 policy as it fits within that. So the leadership and organizational changes in the 9th Party Congress, the Congress oversaw an unprecedented churn within the party's highest leadership bodies. This is something that really has been going on for quite some time, but I think it kind of came to a head at the 9th Party Congress, in which you had a generational turnover and an institutionalized nature of the regime that is moving from, is evolving. And I will talk a little bit about what that evolving means here in a second. And so we have a new generational class of allies whose careers are entirely tied to Kim Jong Un himself. I'll skip over the kind of the nitty-gritty of what happened within the party bodies. If you want to bring that up in Q&A, we can talk about that. But we saw a major overhaul within the Politburo, Central Committee itself. The Secretariat was expanded. We saw an increase in the overlapping and reducing of the circle of authority within the party bodies. We saw a purging of the old guard and for a loyalist technocracy. We saw a sidelining of the second generation. This was highlighted by Chae Long-hae, who was notably dropped from the Central Committee roster and subsequently removed from his legislative post. We saw an institutionalization of close aides around Kim. We also saw the promotion of technocrats within the regime and the elevation of younger officials and specialized technocrats who reflected a move toward a normalized bureaucratic structure that prioritizes technical competence and direct allegiance over revolutionary pedigree. We saw a normalization, I would say, an overall normalization of the state, where Kim Jong Un has transitioned from what I would call a guerrilla-style governance of his father toward a more model of normalized authoritarianism. As I've said, this has been going on for a while. I think this party Congress kind of fed into that and kind of put a cherry on top, so to speak. This evolution prioritizes bureaucratic regularity and institutional predictability as the primary safeguards for the regime's long-term survival. And I think that's what this whole Congress was really about. It's the long-term survival and vision of the regime, as Kim wants to run the regime from this point forward. We've seen a regularization of power with a restoration of the party's formal calendar of 5-year Congress cycles. We've seen a move away from era of erratic on-the-spot decrees and a bureaucracy that operates within a predictable framework and midterm planning. We've seen a delegation down to the departments of the Central Committee, which I think is probably important coming out of this Congress. It's created a layer of an institutional buffer around Kim. When policy failures occur, the blame is absorbed by relevant party department or technocrat, allowing Kim to maintain a normalized image as a supreme arbiter who intervenes to correct a malfunctioning system rather than a dictator ruling by whim. We've seen, as I said, this technocratic buffer. It's an installation of a loyal technocracy. Suggests that Kim values professional expertise as a tool for state stability. And this normalized leadership structure is designed to be resilient. It creates a machine that can sustain the regime's core interest even during periods of leadership absence, which I think is probably important going forward in Kim's mind about what might happen in the future, in the very near future. And it provides, provided this stability will hold, provided that the Kim family remains at the helm. And so this is ensuring that the PEG-2 system is robust enough to endure for generations. Now, as far as the economy and the 2010 policy, I know that the other speakers are going to go into much more detail on this, so I will kind of skirt past a lot of the major findings of in terms of the economic 5-year plan, which I think focused on the shift to quality, having priority sectors such as metallurgy, chemistry, electric power, coal, and machinery, technological modernization. As for the 2010 policy, I think that we're seeing an expanded scope beyond the light industry, and the framework now integrates 3 essential projects: the rural hospitals, grain management facilities, and science and technology centers. There's an element of self-sufficiency that I think is being pushed into the 2010 policy, as well as strategic deterrence and external support. And this really kind of brings in the whole idea of the relationship and the growing relationship between North Korea and Russia and China. What I'll focus and kind of end on is the command and control of the 2010 policy. I think leading into this, coming into the Ninth Party Congress, Kim had warned about the newly built production and service facilities as built as part of the 2010 policy for regional development, where I think he had some criticisms. He said that they were not managed and operated as properly as they should be, and that there were ingrained maladies seeking only immediate gains, quote unquote. I think the Ninth Party Congress and the Supreme People's Assembly recently moved to eliminate systemic vulnerabilities using the dismissal of quote unquote irresponsible officials as a clear warning. Under the 2010 plan, local market flexibility has been replaced by a disciplined cadre system operating under constant threat of purges, exemplified by Kim Yong-chon's public dismissal of Vice Premier Yang Song-hu for incompetent management. This policy is now enforced by a specialized command structure, integrating party loyalists, cabinet technocrats, and military leaders. And following the February Congress, the leadership was further consolidated into a core group tasked with strictly enforcing this top-down economic drive. Some of the people that I believe that are involved in this would be like Jong Un, who replaced Chae Long-hae as the Standing Committee Supreme People's Assembly Chairman, formerly head of the Organization Guidance Department. which is tied directly to a critical organization tied to the 2010 policy, which is the non-permanent Central Committee for Promoting the Regional Development of the 2010 policy. I think Jong Un had a direct relationship to that organization when he was head of the Organization Guidance Department, because that's where this committee is, or this organization is situated. I think he now works very closely with the current head of the Organization Guidance Department, Kim Jae-young, who likely has assumed, I think, direct oversight of this non-permanent Central Committee for 2010 policy for promoting regional development. I think another person involved in this is Pak Tae-song, the Premier of the Cabinet, who's been promoted and is a primary technocrat responsible for the faithful implementation of the project's industrial targets. He leads the Cabinet's efforts to secure the raw materials and local machinery necessary for the 200 targeted factories. Kim Tak-hun, the first Vice Premier, he is focusing specifically on qualitative development in regional industry and agriculture, I believe. And No Kwang-chol, the Minister of National Defense, since the KPA, or the Korean People's Army, is the primary labor force for the 2010 construction projects, or many of them at least. He coordinates the military's People's Army Solidarity Mission, ensuring soldiers meet the strict deadlines for building factories, hospitals, science centers in the 20 delegated cities and counties each year. And then, of course, there's the specialized body that I talked about, the Regional Development 2010 body, and this is operating under the Organization Guidance Department and acts as a nerve center for the project. It bypasses traditional provincial authorities to ensure that resources are directed exclusively to the 2010 sites, effectively re-centralizing the rural economy. In conclusion, I'd like to say, in the early part of his rule, Kim Jong-un sought to activate the economy through foreign capital via special economic zones and economic development zones, but seemed to set this dream aside following the sweeping international sanctions on North Korea, as well as the failure of the Hanoi summit. The 2010 rural development policy can be seen as a substitute for local development through self-sufficiency. The core of local development is the construction of local factories, specifically light industry, producing food, processing goods, and products necessary for people's daily lives. This is a path forward that is tied to Kim Jong-un's larger institutionalization of the state. It is a command structure that reaches from the top to the bottom of the regime. And that said, despite the rhetoric that surrounds the 2010 policy, I believe that there are several structural limitations that the regime will have to deal with. One is the energy constraints. The success of regional factories and modern hospitals hinges on having a stable electricity supply, which right now is far from stable. Inefficiency. Experts argue that building identical small factories in every county ignores economies of scale and risks long-term economic irrationality. And finally, tightened control. The plan emphasizes economic reform mechanisms through a stricter administrative oversight and internal control rather than market-oriented reforms. And I think this is something that the regime will have to deal with in the longer term if this policy is ultimately going to be a success. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Jose, now let me bring you in. What do you see as the key logic behind the 20x10 policy, particularly in terms of how North Korea organizes its economy at the national and regional levels?
예, 짧은 시간이 주어졌기 때문에
So since I have only 10 minutes, it is quite difficult to elaborate on all the logics, so I will just share the perspectives. So I think the most important part here is, in order to understand North Korea, the keyword here is self-reliance, or so-called 주체 in Korean. 주체 or self-reliance means the self-reliance on economy and national defense. So based on their own economy and own power, it needs to establish the self-reliance, and we are now witnessing some kind of evolution in the self-reliance. However, when you only talk about self-reliance, it seems too vague and ambiguous. However, since 1950s, the policies have been carried out. There are four key elements for self-reliance. First is energy, and second is raw materials for production, and third is technology, and the last part is resources. So energy, raw materials, technology, and resource are the key elements to achieve self-reliance. And based on this, all the politics, economy, and defense can achieve self-reliance and independent. And that is the key concept and logic behind 주체 or self-reliance. And actually, this is the main topic of my dissertation, PhD dissertation. Then, whenever North Koreans talk about the key ideas of 주체 or self-reliance, that is resource or people, energy, raw materials, and technologies can be imported. However, resource, the people need to be North Korean. The reason that I'm talking about this here is because while being engaged in regional development, self-reliance has become the keyword, and it has achieved a very detailed and highly sophisticated evolution. At the national level, when it is operated at the national level and the local level, the extent of self-reliance are quite different. When it becomes the state level, there is no senior organization that can rely on, because the state authority need to do all by themselves. That means that you become an adult, independent from your parents. So the state authority and the state needs to be independent from with all these four elements. And if that's the case, when we go into the local level, it doesn't mean that we have to be independent on all these four factors, because we can rely on the state authority. So there are some kind of safety blanket that we can rely on. So it doesn't mean that the local level need to be independent and self-reliant on everything. Then what is the key elements that they have to become independent? First of all, that is raw materials. Raw materials that can be produced need to be completely independent. So raw materials should be locally procured. And so the second important part is resources, the keyword. The resources need to be supplied at the local level. That is another important element. And when it comes to technology and energy, that can be supported from the state level. So it can be divided by two and two. Two parts that need to be covered by local level and another two parts that can be covered by state level. So raw materials and resource need to be procured at the local level. And labor force need to be retrained with continued retrained and re-education in order to upskill their capability. And if that's the case, the main academic principles will be changed. At the state level, they cannot rely on external sources. They cannot think about efficiency. Security should always come first. However, when you go into the local level, when the state level can provide a technology and energy, local level can become independent and self-reliant. Then they can put the priority on efficiency. And that's it. After 2017, when North Korea announced that they are the nuclear state, they think that they focus more on efficiency than security, because they are now get away from the risk of war. So at this moment, at the regional development, efficiency comes first. And the logic here is that instead of establishing individual factory, they are now focusing on establishing the massive scale infrastructure and industrial complex for the regional development. And if that's the case, for the regional development, doesn't mean that just to build a factory would be enough. That would be quite fragmented. That we need to think about some systematic approach to achieve the entire regional development. And in terms of regional innovation, I think we can have more comprehensive look. So instead of looking at each industry and each field, we need to think about how to organically connect them together with more comprehensive development models. And that, if that is done by all state and all country, the regional innovation system need to be established at the local level. And at the state level, innovation system should be established. And at the sub-level, regional innovation system should be established together. And if that's the case, in this direction, organizational structure need to be established. And it can be done for the next 10 to 15 years. And a very important transformation can be seen since 2008. And 2008 was the very important milestone in the history of North Korea. In 2008, the regional innovation was done to establish the new organization. Actually, this organization was established at the city, provincial, and county level, which is Electronic Business Research Institute, or EBRI. This was first established in the history of North Korea, which means the local industries' digital conversion is covered by this EBRI. This EBRI is a local organization to support the digital transformation of local industry. And during the succession training, Kim Jong Un visited the opening event of this EBRI. And at that time, following then Chairman Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un was there. So the first mission that he inherited from Kim Jong-il was to establish the system for regional development, focusing on digitalization. And that's what I claim here. And another part that I would like to stress is that in order to support production system, the National Science Center and Science Service Center was merged together in 1998. And due to the economic crisis during the arduous march, this center was all merged together under the name of Science Center, but it was revitalized in 2009 under the name of Science and Technology Committee. This Science and Technology Committee is located at the state level and local level at the same time. In the Regional Development 2010, the main players are the Science and Technology Committee. Whenever there's any exhibition or event, the main player is done by Science and Technology Committee at each local level. And another important part here is that other than technical support and research, we have to develop the right resources, and that requires the perfect education. And in the Kim Jong-un era, from 2012, the new era educational revolution was launched. And since the end of 2010s, the educational reform has been carried out in full swing. Education system has been completely transformed with different textbooks, and the highly advanced science and technology high school was established in 2017. So in line with the feature of each local industry, they are providing the right education and highly customized and tailored curriculum to this high school. And the first cohort of graduates was released in 2021 when the regional development strategy was first announced. And let me just point out one more part. Even if we establish the right system, if we do not have enough cash, technology, and resource, that cannot become effective. Within this one state, the economic development and industry can come from the military force to the civilian part. So I often say this as the conversion of military to civilian or civilian absorption of military sectors. And this policy was first started from 2008, August 2008, with the breakthrough strategies. So that strategy to break through the cutting edge was announced when the nuclear negotiation was collapsed with the United States. So this conversion of military to civilian, the key to this conversion was digitalization. And also for the advancement of production, CNC technology conversion was introduced. CNC, which was applied for the missile development, will be applied for automation. So at the end of the day, they decided to do this without any external support. Recently, on the military part, which only focused on nuclear and military development, they renamed themselves into industrial enterprise. Actually, this name was used in Russia case, but now it is used in North Korean case as well. So weapons can become the products, and also based on this military equipment that can be used for the production equipment for producing commercial goods. So in conclusion, the regional development policies is not just confined to constructing one factory. This means and this aims to completely change the regional system, and also this aims to achieve the self-reliance of the state. So that's the end of my comments.
Thank you, Jose. Let me bring both of you, Ken and Jose, into the discussion. So you brought up key concepts of normalized authoritarianism and evolution of self-reliance. So this is my question for both of you. Do you see the 20x10 policy as fundamentally a political project shaping the economy, or as an economic and technological strategy that is reshaping governance? Which direction of causality do you find more convincing?
At least for me, I see actually both of them. I see it as I talked about as it's the economic component of an institutionalized state, which I think that Kim is moving North Korea to being a more normalized state. And he's doing it for a variety of reasons. I mean, we talked a lot about self-sufficiency. This is his attempt to try to put together a state that can hold its own, that operates by bureaucratic and predictable rules. And the economy is a large part of that. The question is, as Dr. Kang mentioned, is the idea where you're going to get the cash and the technology from. And, that still, I think, needs to be worked out. I think that there's still some more evolution to come to this. But I see this as you cannot say that this is some sort of politically driven thing, for the institutionalization of the state. At the same time, you can't say this is purely economic. I think it is both that are coming together and being weaved together to create a state that Kim feels very comfortable with going forward at the current time. If he reengages the United States somewhere down the line, maybe we'll start to see some changes. If he really enhances his relationship with Russia and China beyond just security things and really gets into the economic realm, maybe we see some changes there. But right now he's having to do it on his own, and he's trying to reduce the outside factors to things that he can actually control.
Thank you. Jose? Any
예,
comments?
저는 조금 다르게 생각을 해봐야지 재밌을 것 같아요.
I think it might be more interesting to give you a little bit different ideas. I mostly agree with you, but let me just focus on some different parts. So when it comes to the power structure, if we think the power structure is political, I don't think there will be any change on the political leadership because it's been already normalized for a very long time. However, with the sudden death of Kim Jong-il, with the power transition to Kim Jong-un, of course, there might be some disruption, but still their political system remain very stable, and we have Kim Jong-un at this moment. Then what is the main purpose of this change? Like putting aside the political structure, the current policy focused on economic development. The national safety can be secured by military and nuclear weapons. And after that, they want to focus on economic development. And they want to change and improve the everyday life of their people. And that can be done by technology innovation and also the regional development. And actually, their approach seems to be quite different from that of the past. So it means quite different with a great challenge. So by taking the responsibility, there is only one person who can pursue this direction. That name is Kim Jong Un, because he has a strong power over the military force and politics and all the other cabinet, and he has a strong leadership in all these three parts. So that is the reason why Kim Jong Un is raising his own voice, even reverting his past decision, and he has strong commitment to pursue the regional development policies.
Thank you, Ken and Jose. I think we're going to have more time to discuss further on this topic during the roundtable discussion and Q&A. So I'll shift gears to the next session on economic sustainability and industrial structure. So we're joined by Jiyoung Chen, a senior research fellow at the Korea Institute for National Unification, and Ilyana Ragnon, a research associate at the Stimson Center and managing editor of 38 North. And now let me start with you, Jiyoung. As we turn to the question of economic sustainability, how should we understand the 20 by 10 policy in terms of North Korea's existing industrial structure? So in particular, what are the key constraints that could affect whether this model is sustainable over time?
네, 안녕하세요. 최지영입니다. 오늘
Hello
이렇게
everyone,
초대해
this is
주셔서
Choi Ji-young. Thank you for having me here.
북한의 그 기존 산업 구조 측면에서
So in terms of the
지난
existing
2020
industrial
정책의
structure
지속
of
가능성을
North
논의하기
Korea,
위해서는
when in order to
이
talk about the
정책의
sustainability
가장
of
핵심이라고 할수
2010
있는
policy,
지방공업
we
공장들의
have to
성장
think
구조를
about the
살펴보는 게 중요할 것
production
같습니다.
structure
잘
of
아시겠지만
local
북한의
industry and local
지방공업 체계
factory.
자체는
As all of you are
새로운 것이
well aware,
아닙니다.
the local industry
전통적으로
itself is
북한의
not
산업
something
구조는
new. The industrial structure of North Korea is focused on heavy industry and central industry, and also the light industry and local industry that focused on the consumer goods. The local industry and the central industry received some raw materials from local area, and by using the raw materials in the local area, the consumer goods have been produced. However, during the 1990s financial crisis, the operation rate was decreased, and local industry and local factory had to shut down because they could not receive any energy or support from the central part. So in terms of producing the consumer goods, informal economic activities played a very critical role. And the gradual restoration and modernization was done. And after Kim Jong-un took office, there has been a lot of differences and a lot of development has been made. However, before the international sanction against North Korea, external reliance has been divided into official and unofficial aspects, which was high in both parts. And in terms of processed goods and clothing, most of them were imported from China. And they imported most of the finished goods from China. And such a structure, with the prolonged international sanctions, the sustainability has been undermined. So in order to reduce the reliance on import, they have to improve their self-reliance. And they decided to restore the conventional local industry that focus on their self-reliance. And that is the key part of Regional Development 2010. And on the construction part, it seems quite smooth. However, when it comes to the sustainability of this policy, we have to divide the construction phase and operation phase. As all of you are well aware, regional development policy was the very important top priority of the Workers' Party since 2024. It aims to reduce the gap between urban and rural area and also enhance the livelihoods of its people. As mentioned by the previous panelist, at the center level, with a top-down approach, the central authorities are also providing a lot of support. They provide energy and technology, and by stressing the mechanical industry, they are also supporting the introduction of machinery as well. And also the local support has been carried out, and with the improvement and advancement of technology and financial support has been much more improved thanks to the cooperation with Russia. However, when you look into the operation phase, it still remains uncertain whether the central authority can take responsible for all the operation and management of the local industry. So the actual operation is likely to be carried out and executed by the local government. So for its sustainability, two elements are required at the operational phase. First, local government for operation of the local industries, they have to well supply the raw materials and energy. And second part is that the production output need to be well distributed. So let us look into the first part. So facilities and machineries. When you look into the North Korean daily and media, there are some import of machinery from China, and after 2024, North Korea is stressing the policies to develop the machinery and process goods, and in terms of the daily necessities, it doesn't require highly sophisticated technology. So the small-scale machinery can be introduced, but the problem here is how the raw materials can be procured. In case of the processed goods and daily necessities, the raw materials can be procured locally. However, in case of clothing production, textile support should be provided. And even before the international sanctions, raw materials cannot be procured. So a lot of raw materials were imported from China. And such a lack of and shortage of raw materials can be taken place at the local level. And when it comes to the labor supply, the local industry itself is not that big. So in terms of operation, it doesn't require massive scale of labor supply. However, in case of local area, most of the factory is constructed at a small scale county or the region. So it doesn't mean that we can safely say that they have abundant labor supply. And the other one is to secure profits. Facilities and equipment and labor can be well supplied, but only when profits are secured, sustainability can be done. However, from my perspective, consumer goods produced from these small-scale factories are not targeted for the nationwide distribution. It is only targeting the local area distribution for the local residents. And depending on the case, it can be traded at 장마당 as well. So from my understanding, the local outputs that is distributed in the local area might not be traded for free, and some of them can be supplied to schools. For example, like the foods that will be distributed to schools, some the state fixed price can be supplied, and if that's the case, they cannot secure the profits. So at the local government level, they have to set a cap for the price. So their production can be traded at the market price. If that's the case, the products that is produced at the local level can remain competitive with the products that is produced at the informal economy. So for the products that is produced on the local industry need to remain competitive, their quality should be much higher or their price should be much lower. In the urban, during the Kim Jong-il era, the urban complex was very much modernized and industrialized. So processed foods and daily necessities were produced in the urban factory, and they were substituted with the productions from the informal economy. And we have to wait and see whether this kind of phenomenon would be seen in the local economy as well. And in order to secure profits, we have to secure the purchasing power of local residents. But most of them are farmers, and the farmers' income level is very low. And also, since the state authority is purchasing the crops and grains at a very low price, and since their purchasing power is very low, the production output of the local level might not be fully purchased at a full price. So the reason that at the initial period of Kim Jong Un era, the purchasing power of urban residents was much higher, and such a virtuous circle is required. However, with the prolonged international sanction, it remains still uncertain whether that kind of phenomenon can be seen in the local economy. So in summary, for the sustainability of regional development 2010 policies, that depends on profits of the regional development and regional industries, and whether their products remain competitive and whether they can be fully distributed in the market. And the last part that I would like to stress here is that for the local factory to be efficiently managed and operated, the self-discipline of operation need to be secured, like the types of products and price need to be decided with self-autonomy. And of course, in the initial period of Kim Jong-un, socialist business enterprise and responsible management system has been carried out. And under this system, if the local industry's self-discipline is secured with a full supply of raw materials and a well-distribution network, then the profitability of local industry would be secured, and then expect the sustainability of regional development. Thank you. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Ji-young. Ileana, let me turn to you now. On this discussion of sustainability, what do you see as the key challenges in actually implementing the 20 by 10 policy on the ground? Where do you see the biggest gaps between ambition and reality on the ground?
Thank you, Yano, and thank you to GWIX for organizing this event, and to my panelists. I'm going to bring up the rear a little bit and zoom back out after we've talked about the 20 by 10 regional development plan in the political context, and also some key constraints within the industrial structure and at the local level. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about broader challenges implementing and keeping this project up and running in a sustainable manner. I won't spend a lot of time on an overview of what the 20 by 10 regional plan is, but just reiterating that it was begun in early 2024 with the intention of building regional industrial factories in 20 cities and counties over 10 years. The project is obviously of importance to North Korea. It was announced by Kim Jong Un himself, and he's made several appearances at groundbreaking ceremonies, inaugurations, and inspections over the course of the project. The Ninth Party Congress just a few months ago really did codify this plan into the next 5-year plan, talking about the importance to overall economic policy and kind of expanding the scope to include other facilities as well, including hospitals, public health, culture, science and technology, etc. Some themes from the Ninth Party Congress readout reinforced messaging that this plan is to serve as a cornerstone for regional development and economic policy more broadly, that my fellow panelists have also mentioned in their remarks. Some key themes include building out resilience in local economy, bolstering productivity, and improving livelihoods of people at the local level. The readout cited bringing about changes in the grain production structure of the country, improving weak agricultural productivity, and bringing about a new trend of transforming rural villages, emphasized prosperity and development of the state and the well-being of the people, and readjusting and developing the overall sectors of the national economy in a balanced way. The readout also codified the expansion of 20 by 10 priorities to include more than just the regional industrial factories, but also now to encompass public health, hospitals, grain management, leisure complexes, and science and technology facilities, as we had begun to see in the second year of the plan. So ultimately, with the goal of bolstering self-sufficiency and sustainability at a local level, the readout kind of hints at this in terms of 20 by 10. When North Korea watchers were first analyzing the 20 by 10 plan, there were a lot of questions and skepticism as to how long into this 10-year project the goals would be achieved. Would North Korea accomplish the plan's metrics in the first year and in the years to come? From the exterior, it does look like they are accomplishing these metrics, but much is still unknown about the actual implementation and operation of the factories. Particularly when we're operating on state media coverage, there's an emphasis on all of the groundbreaking celebrations, the modern and well-supplied factories and facilities, but we're not sure if this is a result of just those that are shown in state media or of the plan's results more broadly. So there are several implementation challenges that I'll begin to outline. As my fellow panelists have mentioned, the natural resources and building materials required to kind of keep up this level of production are really important here. Raw materials can be locally sourced, but questions remain as to what magnitude. North Korea is extremely proficient in building things up from the ground from concrete and at a quick pace, but the raw materials to keep factories continuously operating is key, as are those to produce the volume of goods that they are said to produce. Building this many facilities across the country in a short span is a tall order. Are there enough resources available concurrently? Does the domestic infrastructure exist to transport materials across county lines? It appears that North Korea's strategy for ensuring enough building materials is to kind of put that onus on the local provinces and counties to figure out how to obtain and manage these resources. As Hoje stated in his remarks, raw materials and resources are sourced from the local level. This also kind of leaves room to shift blame to the local level outside of the central government if things go awry, facilities aren't well built or as well supplied, or if project timelines are stalled. We've seen examples in the past of North Korea stalling major construction projects and facing delays likely due to resource constraints, like with the Pyongyang General Hospital and the Wonsan-Kama Beach Resort. There have been some fissures already, as the speed of construction has increased in the second year, and some openings have seemed a little bit rushed. For example, Kim Jong Un inspected a hospital and noticed, quote, a series of deviations revealed in the construction, end quote, of the facility. So if this is occurring when Kim Jong Un is visiting and inspecting, what's going on when he is not around, and what does oversight look like at the local level? Another challenge with implementation and sustainability goes back to electricity. The electricity supply has been a perennial issue in North Korea. And while it's possible that conditions have improved overall, especially in cities and well-populated areas, to what extent does that extend to some of the more rural counties and cities that are intended to be beneficiaries of 20 by 10? It's likely too that 20 by 10 construction is pulling from the electricity grid at higher rates than the usual cadence of construction, which may also be adding strain to the overall power system. As Jong talked about, the machinery and factory equipment part of the equation, some reports note increased imports of necessary machinery from China, but the extent to the supply is unclear, and if what that adds to North Korea's existing resources is sufficient. And beyond all of that needed to construct and build the facilities are the supplies to keep the facilities well stocked and running. There have already been reports of poor production quality at foods and daily goods factories. In some instances, factories have been reportedly shut down. It appears that initially a lot of the products have gone to store shelves in Pyongyang, and while that the intention is for the materials to be distributed evenly across 20 by 10 sites, that might not be realized to the full extent yet. So this could change as more factories come online and demand from the capitalist spread, but this also does depend heavily on supplies. Like panelists have also mentioned, while manpower needed for construction is not necessarily a challenge, it's unclear how these factories are being staffed. And furthermore, for facilities that require more technical skills like the hospitals and public health facilities and science and technology, it's unclear how these people are being pulled to work in the factories and the other facilities. There have been some mentions, especially in the Ninth Party Congress readout, of concentrating efforts on training skilled workers, especially in technology and the medical fields as part of this initiative, which may kind of hint at the need to keep up the manpower required to fully implement these programs. And while not a material implementation challenge, the scope of the project may pose an issue as well. When it was just factories, that seemed a little bit more of like a manageable scope for 20 by 10, but it has since expanded. And now there are several different types of disparate facilities that are to be constructed. With the intention to distribute at the local level, Ji-young talked a little bit more about how this may impact local markets, but if 20 by 10 supply and distribution is unable to keep pace with demand, it will be interesting to see how this affects the informal markets in the short or the midterm. And lastly, an implementation challenge that kind of builds on what Ken touched on in his remarks is the management at the local level. While less economic or fiscal related, this may be a focus moving forward. And now that there's a specialized structure for kind of management and enforcement of 20 by 10 facilities, it will be interesting to see how this plays out as the project expands beyond its first and second years. As with most challenges analyzing North Korea, we're often left with more questions than answers, and we'll never really be able to understand the full scope of implementation of this project. But when we glean our information from state media and lack on-the-ground insights, much is left up to speculation. So it will be interesting to see how much of this implementation actually occurs under 20 by 10 and what state media chooses to tell us moving forward. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Yano.
Okay, thank you, Iliana. Let me open this up to both of you, Ji-young and Iliana. We've heard about both the structural constraints and the practical challenges of implementation. So let me ask this. Are the main limits of the 20 by 10 policy rooted in North Korea's underlying economic structure or in the difficulties of execution on the ground? And which of these do you think will ultimately determine whether the policy succeeds or fails? Who wants to go first?
예, 제가 먼저
So
말씀드리겠습니다.
I will go first.
지금 건설 과정,
So
현실적인
in
집행
the
과정은
construction process and the
물론
actual
북한
execution
당국의
process
선전도 영향을 미쳤을 수
is
있지만
affected by the
일상으로
propaganda of
중앙의
North Korean authority,
집행정이
but
지원으로
some of them
효율적으로
is
이루어지고
smoothly
있었던
carried out thanks to the
그래서
support
이
of the central authority.
정책의 성패를
And
좌우하는
also the
것은
success and failure
구조적인
of this
제약이 될 것으로
policy
보이는데요.
seems
구조적인
to be
제약이 먼저
determined by the
까놓으시죠.
structural
다시피
constraints,
생산에
which
필요한
means, as I mentioned
원자재를
before,
국내에서
raw
원활하게
materials that is
조달하기
required for
쉽지 않다는
production.
물리적인
It is quite
제약과
difficult to procure and
그리고
supply raw
또
materials
생산에
locally.
대한
That is
충분한
physical constraints.
수요의
And the other
형성을
one is
세우기에는
in
지방
order to
주민들의
build the right
능력이
demands for the
충분하지 않아서
production, they do
효율성을
not have,
확보하기
the local
어렵다는
residents do not
재정적
have enough
제약이
local
두
residents.
가지가
So that is the
구조적
physical restraints
제약이고
because
이것은 반드시
we do not
해결되셔야
have
할
enough
문제로
purchasing power to buy
보이지는
them.
않습니다.
Actually, this cannot be addressed
현재로서는
in the
북한의
short term.
직접적 관심사가 높기
At this
때문에
moment, since there are a
육산하고까지
lot of high
공장이 잘
interest on this
준공이
policy,
되었고
so the
공장에서
factory has been well
생산되는
constructed so
생산물이
far, and
매체에서
some of the
등장하는
products that is
등으로
produced in the
보아서는
factory have been
성과가
well
나타나는
covered by the
것으로
media.
보입니다.
So it seems that there are some
근데
kind of
중앙의 지원이 축소된
actual
이후에
performance.
지방
However,
단위의 어떤
after
구체적인
there's less
지원
support from the
도달이
central government,
가능할지 우리가 좀 주목해
it
볼
still
필요가
remains
있는데요.
uncertain on whether the
김정은
self
집권 이후에
support
북한은
from the local level
2015년에
would be possible.
지방
In
예산법을
2012,
제정했고
the
그
Local
법을
Budget
자세히
Act
보면
was, and when you
지방의
look
어떤
into the
전체적인
details of
수입
this
원천을
act,
마련하기 위해서 많은
in order to
그
secure their
노력을
own
기울이고
profit
있는
source,
것을 확인할
local
수
government
있습니다.
and local authorities are working very
북한의 그
hard.
지방발전 2010 정책 같은
And
경우도
this regional
국내
development
시설에
2010 policy focused on
서비스 그 관련 시설들이 포함이
developing
되었는데
the service-related
병원이라든지
facilities, including
종합봉사소,
hospitals,
양도 관리 시설
the
이런 것들은
multi-purpose complex and
여러
green
어떤
management facilities, and
보건소
healthcare,
어떤
cultural
상업시설입니다.
complex, and other
이
commercial facilities.
시설들이 주민들에게
So these
잘
facilities
이용이 되어서 또
can
수익성이
be well
확보가 되어야
utilized
하는데
by the local
최근에
residents
병원
to
같은
secure the
경우에는
profits.
북한이 무상
And recently, in case of hospitals,
했었는지가
I'm not sure whether the public healthcare is well managed, but most part of them haven't become the paid healthcare service. Most of the services price was set, which is almost equivalent to the market price. So we can see a lot of efforts to secure profits. And I think that is the policy efforts to enhance sustainability and to overcome some structural constraints. Nevertheless, North Korea has currently focused on this regional development policy. However, they have to continue to pay attention to the profitability and sustainability and operational status of this local industrial complex and factories. And actually, we are not sure whether the North Korean authority continue to keep a lot of interest in this regional policy to the end, even after 10 years. And through its cooperation with Russia, if they continue to expand their cooperation, exports, and import as well, then I think there are high possibility that they would pay less attention to this regional development policy. So appoint 20 different counties to build the construction facilities. But that initial policy cannot be sustained for a while, after the 10 years. But such policy conversion is very much affected by security issue of the North as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ileana?
Just building off a little bit, I agree with what Jim was talking about of how it's still early. We're only a few years into the 20 by 10 plan, and it will be interesting to see how much the regime still prioritizes this plan moving forward and in the future. I think it is interesting that the types of facilities have shifted from solely providing goods and being factory driven to also being able to provide services. And I think that also helps to take some of the resource burden off of the regime and at the local level as well. And while building grain management facilities and science and technology facilities and hospitals and other cultural driven environments is also a resource intensive process, it's a little bit less so on the production side. So it requires factories to produce less goods. So it'll be interesting to see if that shift kind of represents caution towards implementation challenges that are already arising.
Thank you, Ileana. So now let me open this up to all of you. You've each approached the 20 by 10 policy from different angles, political, institutional, and economic. And I'd like to invite you to engage with one another. For the sake of discussion, I'd like to play devil's advocate. So what is one point from another speaker that you find most compelling or most questionable, if any, and why?
I found all of the speakers very compelling in their arguments. Definitely, I learned a lot in this discussion because normally I focus up at the top at the centralized control and things like that. As I said, I'm not an economist. And so really to kind of understand the kind of theories behind this thing, the actual rules and regulations that are being put into place to make this go forward, I think is something, it really puts a lot of meat on the bone, that this isn't just a wave of the hand about the economy, but it is something real. I think if we go back and look at Kim Jong Un's, today is Kim Il-sung's birthday, or at least in the United States, April 15th. On that day in 2012, he made his first public speech, and in which he talked about largely the economy. I think Kim Jong Un has in his heart, I think economic development is something that he really wants to try to figure out how he pulls off. He's kind of gone back and forwards about different types of strategies, but I think that the legitimate attempt at economic policy and making the system work. And I think that all of the questions and challenges that you raised as there will be real challenges for the regime are something that that we're going to probably watch and see how Kim navigates going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Any comments or questions?
네,
네, 지영.
방금 말씀하신 그 켄 교수님
So,
말씀에 이어가지고 몇 가지
following
보태서
Ken's comments, let me
말씀하신
just add a couple of comments.
김정은
As you
위원장
mentioned, Chairman
집권하면서부터
Kim Jong Un, ever since he took
상대에서
office,
생산 강국, 군사 강국을 건설했다면 내 대해서는
if
경제적으로
the previous
건설하겠다, 경제를
leader
많이
established the
강조했었고,
ideological
특히
state,
국민
Kim Jong Un
생활에
mentioned and stressed the importance of
국민 생활을
economy,
위한
and he
소비
wants to
재생
become the
산업,
economic
통합 성장을
powerhouse.
특히
And
강조했습니다.
also, he
북한이
stressed the production from the
2013년에
light
김정은
industry.
집권
In
6년 차에
2013, at the second
경공업
year
개혁이라는
of
것을
Kim Jong Un's
주장하면서
regime,
소비 재생산에
he
굉장히 관심을
held the
투명하기도
competition
했고,
for light
이러한
industry, and
어떠한
he paid a
정책의
lot of interest
방침이
on
특히
production of
김정은 집권
consumer
초기
goods.
사회주의
And
기업
such
책임 관리제
interests
성과와 같이
has been
연동되면서
aligned with
소비재
the
생산이 국내에서
SERMS.
개선되는 등의 성과를
So some
보이고
of the
있습니다.
production and
지금은
manufacturing have been
국제화되는
somewhat
세상에서
improved at that time. Of
그
course, the
수출이
condition at this moment
단절되고
is
자유롭게 살
different.
수밖에 없는
There's no export,
상황이었고,
and they have
코로나
to become
3년에
very
굉장히
much
어려운
self-reliant,
상황에서
and they have
지방
gone through a lot
주민들의
of sufferings during the
생활
COVID-19
모습보다 훨씬 더
3 years.
후퇴되었을
And
것이라고
also the
생각하고,
livelihoods and living
요즘 이
standards of
사람들은
rural
식량
area
생산을
become
굉장히
much
많이
poorer
담당하는
than
중국
before.
노동자들이기
But they
때문에
are very
이
important
사람들한테
labor
유인을
force,
제공할
which is
다양한
responsible
정책이
for
필요했고,
the food
지방발전
production.
정책은
So
그
the
연장
central
선상에서
authority
지지된
needs a lot of
것으로
incentives to
이해가
provide
됩니다. 특히 이제 북한의
them.
어떤
The regional development
보도들을
policy
보면
is part of that
북한이
effort.
얼마나
When you look
어려울
into the report
때
from North
지방발전
Korea,
정책을 추진하고 있는지에
it
대해서
shows
굉장히 강조를 많이 하고 있습니다.
it stressed
어떤
how
표현이냐면
much the North
만진
Korean
위에
authority is
덕짐을 지고
working
있다
very
이런 표현을
hard
봅니다. 이미
on
많은
pursuing the regional development. It
짐을
says that
지고
they
있는데
already
또
have a lot
다른
of
짐을
burden on their shoulder,
국민들의
but they are
생활을
putting
개선을 위해서 지고
additional
있다라고 하면서
burden to
어려움을
improve the
토로하면서
living
그래도
standards
추진하고
of their
있거든요.
people. And
그런
despite a lot of
동안에도 지금
challenges and a lot of
말씀하신 것처럼
difficulties, they are
굉장히 어떤
pursuing these regional
경제
development
개선에 대한
policies.
부담
And in that
이런
regard,
것들을 조금
they have some
가지고
strong
있고
commitment
그것이
to
이
improve
지방
their
발전
economic
정책에 대한
conditions.
관심으로
And that is
나타낸다고
the
저는
reason
생각합니다.
why they pay a lot of interest on this regional development policy.
Thank you,
저도
지영.
한 말씀
So let me just add one more
할 수
point
있을까요?
here.
예.
please go ahead.
오늘 지영 선생님이나 일리아나
As
선생님의
Dr. Choi
좀 질문이
and
많이 있으셨다라고
Dr. Gauss
하는데
mentioned,
조금 더 그 질문에 대한 답이 북한
so
문헌에나
I think the
그
answer to the
정책들에서
question
보이는
and
것들이 좀
answer
있어요. 예를
can be seen
들면
from
배우나
the
저도
policies of
해야
North
된다고
Korea.
하는데 원료를 어떻게 공급하느냐.
So
그
how
이유는
to supply raw
2021년부터
materials?
2021년부터 한 3년간
From
기마산업 생산이라고요. 그리고
2021 to
다른 초기
2024, they
지방
made a lot of
공장들을 만들던
efforts.
곳에서 했던
And
노력을 보면
actually, when you look into
우선
the
두
efforts
가지입니다.
they have
인력을
done in the local
제거하고
industry,
집에서
they reshape
인력을
and
하지 않던
reform the
일하지
resource
않던
structure.
가정주부부터
Like
모이고 또
housewives
이
who didn't work in
사람들을
the past or the
최대한
elderly
돌보는 조치를
have been
취하고 두
mobilized as well
번째는
as the labor
뒤에 놀고
force.
있던 산,
And the
이
second
쓰이지
part
않던
is that
밀수 농경지들을
some
개간을 한다.
idle
이건 그냥
lands
개간을
was
한다는 게 아니라
started to be
그 지역을 잘
redeveloped.
알던 사람 혹은
And
그전에
the
컨트롤하지 않았던
locals
노동자들을 활용해서
or some of the labor
효율적으로
force
경지를 관리하는 것.
can
그다음 더
take
크게는
full
지방
advantage of this
지방은
idle
항상
land. And the
지방적으로
other
건설하고
one is
있지만
the size and
이제는
scale.
공장 건설하는 거 보면 폭발을 아예
And when you
이
look
전체를
into the
폭발을 해버리고
construction,
처음부터
they are
첫 단지를 다
just
하는 모습을
exploding all the
보면
region and they are
20개
building up
정도의
the
확대되어
factory
있던
from scratch.
공장들을
And
한
that
지역의
said,
센터에
all
모아서
of the
공장
20 or
공감대를
30
만드는
factories that have
것이죠.
been
이제 그런
scattered
모습들이
are now
구체적으로 나오고
concentrated in
있어서
one
원료를
area. And
어떻게
such efforts can be
공급하느냐가
seen.
아주
So how
구체적으로
to
나오고 있는
supply raw
거예요. 그게 이제
materials
얼마나
can be seen.
효율적이냐,
But
효과적이냐는 그 다음이죠.
we need to think
수출을
about
늘리기
how
때문에
efficient and how
수출
effective
수익이
they can
말고
be.
자체적으로 어떻게
So
하느냐
instead of
그 되고요.
export or
또 하나가
profits, we
일리아나
have to
선생님이
think
얘기했던
about how they are doing
전쟁비례도
right
마찬가지입니다.
now.
새로운
And also,
공장이
this
생겼다고
is
해서
the
더
issue
생긴 게 아니라
related
원래
to
있던 것들을
electricity.
없애고 만들었기
And
때문에
they
그럼
are
어떻게
building up the new.
됐던가를
It
보면
doesn't mean
에너지 효율이 더
they
좋아지는
build up
거죠.
the new factory and they
형광등이나
have to
고결등을
enhance the
없애고
energy
LED 있으면
efficiency.
무조건 좋아지는
They
거죠.
change the
에너지
type of
효율을
the
좋게 만드는
electricity they
그릇에서
are
에너지
using.
소비량을
And in
줄이면서
this trend,
에너지
they
조금만
are
하지 않아도 풍미될 수
using
있는
less
첫째가
energy
됩니다. 두
consumption
번째는
while
북한의
maximizing the
경제력
energy
부족은
power.
국가 전체적으로
the electric industry has been changed to the state level management. It used to be the provincial level management, but by introducing and applying the smart grid system, that is controlled by the state level. So production remains the same, but with more efficient distribution network, they are now adjusting the energy usage. And if these two approaches are combined, then electricity supply would become much more efficient and much more smooth. And the new industrial complex can be much more well operated. And if that's the case, even if they are not doing the nuclear power generation, there will be more energy supply and more efficiency. And I don't think we have to be that much concerned about energy at this moment. And that's it.
Ileana, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you about this question because you're with 38 North, which is very famous for its satellite imagery analysis. So I wonder if you have any information that you can share today with us about the actual operation of the factories launched thanks to this 20 by 10 policy from above. Do you see any meaningful information about how actively the factories are operating?
Sure. Unfortunately, there's only so much you can really glean from satellite imagery. It's an incredible tool to kind of see overall trends and construction and progress and how fast things are being built and where throughout the country they're being built. But without, regular imagery of the same time every day, you can't really establish any patterns of life. So it's difficult to say in terms of overall activity, how operational all of the factories are just from using commercial satellite imagery, but we can say that construction has continued at a fast pace, and there really is kind of a distribution throughout the country of where these facilities are being built. We can confirm when Jong Un visits for an inauguration, that factory does in fact exist, or that hospitals are being built nearby the clusters of factories. But it's difficult from using imagery alone just to kind of determine what's going on inside. Unfortunately, that would be excellent if we had better ways to do so.
Right. So as far as what's going on inside the factories, I think we're basically relying on the human, right? For example, daily NK's report about their what they heard from their internal sources, but not that many positive news from them. So everybody's wondering what's going on exactly in the factories. I think over the next 15 minutes, we can take questions from the audience. And so the question is this, you seem to suggest to compete first, the regime transitioning more towards technocrats and pushing decision down to committees and lower levels of the regime. Second, a transition of the 20 by 10 policy towards regime loyalists, including very senior officials. So can you expound a bit on whether you see any contradiction in these two trends and how we should think about them?
No, I don't think there's any contradiction. I think the fact I was talking about was the centralized piece of this puzzle. That doesn't mean that there isn't authorities further command, and there's also a system that is transmitting information up and down the chain of command, guidance down, information up within the party apparatus that is keeping an eye and trying to make sure the things that need to be done are being done. And then on top of this, they also have making sure that the accountability is there. That if people mess up or are held accountable for mistakes, problems, then they're going to have to be accountable for those actions. And so what I was talking about more was how this kind of fits in a larger system. But as you heard from the other speakers, there is much more going down as you go further down into the provinces and into the localities. about how authorities are being worked. And I guess you could talk about how the party apparatus ties into that, how the internal security apparatus ties into that, a little bit beyond what we're talking about today. But so I don't necessarily see a contradiction in those things. I think that Kim, since his very early days as leader, has been surrounded by economic theorists and economic advisors, some of whom are known, many of whom are not known, many of whom have had outside experience and lived in the outside world and understand some of the various economic theories that are out there, capitalism and so on and so forth. And I think that a lot of that information has been brought back in to them as they develop economic policy. So, I think, as I said, there are things that are going on at the top side, up at the very central level. But I think the more important things that were relevant to what we're talking about today is happening down further in the provincial and locality. There is authority. We know that Kim has been pushing down authority down and trying to make the system more accountable and less reliant on patronage systems and things like that. There is still some of that, but I think that he is trying to free up the system to be much more accountable to itself and act more efficiently, as has been talked about today by the other speakers.
Thank you. And we have two more questions. Basically, I think they are basically the same. Asking about the significance of the Russia factor. Questions from Anar Shaikenova and anonymous attendee. So the question is, the money for the 20 by 10 program is likely coming from earnings on military cooperation with Russia. And Dr. Che mentioned Russian money. So do you think the program will halt once the money is gone from this source? Do you know any other cooperation rendered by Russia or 20 by 10 program implementation? So do you think Russia is the major funder of this whole 20 by 10 initiative? 지영?
네. 좀 전에 질문 주신 사회주의 기업 책임
Okay, related to SERMS and this Russia cooperation,
발전 정책의 영향 이 두 부분에
the impact on Russia, let me just elaborate on my answer. When it comes to the socialist enterprise responsible management system, as you mentioned, this, according to the recent North Korea media, this SERMS has not been that much seen in the 8th Congress of the People's Party, Labor Party, and even though the number was reduced, but it was often seen. But in this 9th Congress, it was not seen at all. But within the basic economic framework of North Korea, this SERMS remained consistent and sustained. And as Professor Ken mentioned, some of the systems and institutions of North Korea have now changed in more predictable manner after the inauguration of Kim Jong Un. And when it comes to the economic operation and management in North Korea, they are managing the country by enacting the law or amending the law. And throughout this enactment and amendment, we can see this SERMS. In case of fiscal and financial management, rights are currently done by enterprise. And enterprise has some rights to impose and handle and manage the financial resources. With the amendment of this act, this right was imposed to enterprises. And that said, enterprise has some kind of rights about their financial and fiscal management under the law. However, with prolonged international sanction in order to secure the budget, the scope of fiscal management has been reduced. some kind of flexible
이런
response is
제도적
seen.
일관성이
And
김정은
such
집권 여건을
system
좀
consistency
만들어주는
is
요소들 중에
seen,
하나인 것 같고요. 두
explicitly
번째,
seen
이제
in the Kim Jong-un era.
러시아와의 어떤
And the second part is about the
협력이
cooperation with Russia.
지방 발전 정책에 미치는 영향과 관련해서 물론
The impact of
러시아가
the
지방
cooperation with
발전 정책
Russia and
자체를
regional development
지원한다기보다
policy. It doesn't mean that
북러 협력의 특성상 민간보다는 국가 주도로 협력이
it
이루어지고 있고
doesn't mean that Russia
협력을
is
통한
directly
대가가
supporting the
국가로
regional
가르기
development.
때문에 이것이 이제
However,
김정은 집권 초반
as a response,
일반적인
as a
대외
payoff
국가의
to
경제
the
협력이
cooperation,
민간에서
there are some
그
financial
이익이 민간으로
sources, and
이끌어오는
that
거라는
profits
첫
are
발전이 보이고요.
provided
그래서
to
북러 협력이
executing this
진전되면서
2010 program.
북한의
And with
지정
the
여건에
progress
있어서 이
of North
탄력도가
Korea's
개선된 것으로
cooperation with
보여지고
Russia,
북한이
North
매년
Korea's
최고
physical
임기를
condition has been
예상하기 위해서
improved. And according
작년에
to
어떤 그
in
재정
the
수립
report in the
확보 상황에
Supreme
대해서
meeting,
평가를 하는데
there will be
2027년부터
assessment about the physical
23년까지
status of North Korean
해제
authority.
후반부에는
And
굉장히
in the
재정
initial
수입
period of the
확보를
8th
하지 못한 것에
Congress
대한
of the party,
부정적인
there
어떤
were a lot of
평가가
negative
있었는데
feedback and assessment
24년과
about the
25년의
lack of
재정
physical
수입 확보에
conditions.
대해서는 그러한
However,
문제가
in
인사되지
24 and
않았고
25,
올해
such
같은
comments have
경우도
not been seen.
재정
And this year,
지출율이
in 26,
5.8%로
physical
지난 5년에
expenditure
비해
was a
대폭 는 것을 확인할 수
5.8%,
있습니다.
which was
그래서 국가의
increased
어떤
much
그
higher than
러시아와의
that of the
협력이
past.
국가 주도로
So, North
이루어지면서
Korea's
수입을
cooperation with
국가가 확보하고
Russia
이것이
have led to
탑다운 방식으로
higher
이루어지는
revenue,
지방 발전
and
정책을
this has led to
추진하는
the
데 긍정적인
top-down
영향을
approach to
미친
pursue the
것으로
regional
평가하고
development.
있습니다. 그렇지만 이제 북러 협력이
However,
그
cooperation between North
러우 전쟁의
Korea
어떤
and Russia,
그에 따라서
depending on the
소원해지면
progress of the
국가의
war in
재정 여건이
Ukraine,
계속 약화될
can be
가능성이
undermined,
있고
and that
이게
will
지방
lead to
발전
the
정책의
weakening
추진에
physical
부정적인
condition of
영향을
North
미칠
Korea.
수는 있을
And this can
것으로
also have some negative impact on
보입니다.
2010
네,
program.
여기까지 하겠습니다. 예.
Okay, that's it.
네, 호재.
예. 그 북러 관계가 지방 발전에 영향을 줬냐는
So,
시기를 좀
whether
봐야지
the North Korea
우리가
and
알아볼
Russia
수 있습니다.
cooperation and
지방 발전
relations
전략은
have some
있었고
impact on
여러
regional development, we have
이야기가
to
있고요.
look
그다음에
at the time
협력을
period.
재개하는 거는
This
그게
regional development
순수히
was
6월
started in
27일
2024,
그래서
and also the actual
실질적으로는 지방
cooperation
발전 그
was
뭐냐 성공은
started
언제
in the
나오냐?
mid
나는
2024.
나중에
So what we can
북러
say here
전략이
is that the regional
정말
development
심화되고
was
활성화되는 게 그
announced
이후입니다.
much
그래서 만약에
earlier,
영향을 줬다면
and the
이
cooperation
차년도
with Russia
25년,
was done in the
26년에
mid
영향을
24.
줬었다라고 우선
And
이해해야
if
되고요.
that impact
두
is made, I
번째는
think that would be
러우
in
전쟁은 지금
2026.
국지적인 일시적인
And the war
이벤트라고
in
보면
Ukraine seems to
장기적인
be
거는
just a one-off
러시아와
event.
북한의 전략적
And
동맹자 관계 그 발전을 봐야 됩니다.
we
저는
have to
거기서
look
다른
into the
뭐 11조
partnership
안에
between
조항을
Russia
보는데요.
and North Korea.
원래 국가
And I
간의
look into the
무역을 할
Article
때는
11
수입하는
whenever there
국가에
is any
실질
trade
감사서를 다시
between countries,
만들어서 제출을 해야
the
됩니다. 즉
quality report needs
자국에서
to be
만들어서
submitted.
수입을 한다고 하면 자기
And
거를
if there is any
가지고
export
그냥
from their own
너
country,
사줘라고 하면 안 되겠죠. 왜?
actually they
수입해서
have to
쓰는
prepare some
나라의 규정에
official
맞아야
report
되는데
in order
이
to ensure the
11번 조항을
quality
보면
and all the
무역에서
other
양국의
specification and
판매량이다.
qualifications of trading
사항을
partners.
인정한다고 돼 있습니다. 다르게 말하면
And that
수출입을
said,
할 때, 북한 입장에서
whenever there's any
수출을 할 때
import or
자국
export,
상품을 수출할 때
when
장벽이
they
혹은 비용이
export their products
낮아지는
to
경우가 많습니다.
overseas, the barrier
그래서
would
그
be
이후에 북한은
dramatically lower
군인 말고
after the
민간
cooperation with
사업이
Russia. So
활용
civilian, like
효과가 굉장히
ranging from
좋아졌습니다.
cosmetics,
그래서
the
저는
trade has
굉장히
been expanded
부러웠습니다. 남북
dramatically.
관계의 이런 전략적 동맹자 관계에
So such
해당하는
a
모든
strategic
장벽을
partnership,
낮추고 교류 협력을 할 수
all
있는
the
것을 만들었으면
barriers can be
좋았을 것
lower,
같아요.
and I think
러시아하고 그
such
샘플
barriers can
모델을
be
만들었다고 생각이
and
됩니다.
Russia
그 이후
made such
2년
samples with
정도밖에
North
안
Korea,
지났지만 지금
and it's
어디까지
been only
갔느냐?
2 years ever
대학생들,
since then. But
대학원생들이
at this
주로
moment,
양국으로
the college
유학을 갈 수 있게
students
하게
and
됐고
graduate school
특히
students
성수문에서
can
모스크바의 북한
visit
상품
each other.
전시실이 만들어지고 있죠. 그래서 이
And also there are some
전략이
kind of
그러면
exhibition,
앞으로
Moscow
장기화될
exhibition
것 같습니다.
for
결론적으로
the Trade
미국이익
Expo.
정책의 영향은
So
중간에
2010
생각이 추가하는 수입을
programs
확충하는 데는 분명히 영향을 줬을 것
could
같지만
also have some
이동이동 정책을
affected
시작하는
by
데는
this
그대로
cooperation.
영향을
But
줬을 것
in
같습니다.
starting this
네, 이상입니다.
2010 program, I don't think the cooperation with Russia would have that much impact.
Thank you. Ken, you are a Sovietologist, right? So I think you have a say on this.
Started my career as a Sovietologist, yeah. And I ran the Russia program at CNA and involved in it at IDA, so on. Mainly from the military and political side, though, not economic.
So
But in
what do you
terms
think?
of the relationship, I think that there is a lot to say that the relationship will extend beyond just the war in Ukraine. It could be affected. It could mean that Russia reduces its amount of support to North Korea. But I think that Putin has a lot of reasons for maintaining that relationship with North Korea. It helps him not only in his Asia policy, Northeast Asia, but it also helps him in his relationship with China. He likes to have North Korea as kind of a balancing figure there that helps him, gives him a bit of leverage in his discussions with Xi, which he doesn't have a whole lot of leverage. So I think that the relationship with North Korea will continue, and I see that it's not going to be a major source of revenue for North Korean economic policy, but there will be some there, and I suspect that China will also weigh in as it has. Question is, how is it going to manage its North Korea policy going forward? We're just going to have to see how that plays out.
Okay. This question is from 고은정 Choi from Seoul National University for Hoje. So this is about the efficiency of 20 by 10. The initiative in terms of economy of scale, this initiative could also lower the economic efficiency and productivity. Could be viewed as temporary response to sanctions on North Korea. What do you think, Hoje?
This is done from the perspective of economic sanction, but it doesn't mean that because of economic sanction, North Korea announced it's a self-reliance policy. It doesn't mean that they are not going to make any export at all. And since 2019, instead of sanction, they are taking some preemptive action for economic sanction, thereby maximizing the self-reliance. And actually, this is not directly aligned with this, but when it comes to self-reliance, let's say if they establish the self-reliance, in order to establish the self-reliance on the local part, as I mentioned before, there are some kind of subtle adjustment. It can be regarded as some kind of evolution. So wherever there is a need, now this can be done. If sanctions are lifted, local self-reliance may weaken with variations across regions. As Dr. Chen noted, one example is advancing a social enterprise management system through incremental fine-tuned adjustments.
기업 관리제를 추진하는 것처럼 지방 발전 정책은 북한 전체 흐름에서 보면은
So if you
무조건
look at the
등장해야 될
overall trend, if it's a policy, local development, something that we should place importance on. So
전에 제가 대답한 것처럼
as I mentioned in my previous remarks, when it comes to strategic partnership with Russia, I think that that will have a big impact because now the North Korea is suffering from the UN sanctions. So I think it will be an important benchmark to track what would be the North Korea without the international sanctions, and how much will be the level of tuning and readjustment will be the.
Thank you. Before we wrap up, I'd like to sincerely thank all our distinguished speakers for joining us today, especially Ji-young, who stayed up late into the night to participate. And I'd also like to thank the JUICs and teams for organizing this event and our simultaneous interpreters for their excellent service throughout the discussion. And of course, thank you all for joining us today. With that, let me conclude today's webinar. Thank you and take care. Thank you. 감사합니다.